And welcome back to the Oopa Loopa Cafe here in the second segment here on the 15th of January 2013. In this particular segment, we have, of course, our first hour Temerity magazine clip, but we also have this story about American prison systems versus ancient Roman prison systems. I was doing a little research overnight and I found a story. This one comes from West CIV Project, westcivproj.wordpress.com, and it's dated the 10th of March of 2010. So it's got some dated information in it, which makes it even worse. Now, this particular slide, if you will, comes from my online buddy Dennis Crenshaw's site, the Hollow Earth Insider, and it describes how much of the prison system has either been contracted out or it has been turned into slave labor camps. It's not entirely accurate, but it's pretty much the premise of the piece that was put together, which you can see in a YouTube through thehollowearthinsider.com. And it's kind of interesting in that there are some aspects of truth in it. But if we go to a comparison to ancient Rome, we find that in ancient Rome, the only people who were in prison were either there for debt, and if they could raise the debt on 3 public readings that they were in prison over debt, they could raise that money, they could be freed. On the other hand, if they were in there for some other comparatively minor offense, they were encouraged to just go away, just be self-exiled. Sometimes they were exiled, but most of the time, if it was a truly egregious crime, they were executed. If they admitted to it on the spot, they were executed on the spot in most cases. But for those who did not admit, they probably died in prison waiting their trial, because the prisons were not great places to be in ancient Rome. And in fact, they were there for one particular prison inside of the Roman Colosseum at its entrance was actually built first in 509 BC. But it was in use up into about the 3rd century, perhaps 4th century AD. So nearly 1,000 years of that dungeon being in business. In fact, that is, according to history, the dungeon where Saul of Tarsus spent his imprisonment awaiting his beheading. In his case, it didn't take very long. That's probably why he lived long enough to be killed. But when you compare that to the United States today, we use prisons to hold inmates awaiting trial, but also for punishment. Capital punishment is rarely used, as evidenced by the statistic that only 52 inmates were executed in 2009, as compared to the 1,610,446 people being held as prisoners. And this is actually coming from the U.S. Department of Justice. Also, the methods of capital punishment are considered to be much more humane than during the Roman Republic, with the use of lethal injection or electrocution being the most common. I don't know of anybody who's using electrocution anymore. The punishment of an eye for an eye no longer exists, and we now have an alternative or adjunct in incarceration under the system of parole and probation, where prisoners are released into the community under certain conditions, which only if not met result in reincarceration. In 2008, over 7.3 million people were on probation, in jail, or in prison, or on parole at the end of that year, which is 3.2% of all U.S. adult residents, or 1 in every 31 people had some involvement with the judiciary system. Just seems like an awful lot, and it is in fact higher than any other country on the planet. So maybe we're doing too much, maybe we're doing it all wrong, but I think something's going to have to give, because on the average it's between $45 and $450 per prisoner per day, depending on the facility, the location, all that. 45 is a bargain. Now, Sheriff Joe gets by for about $1 worth of bologna and a tent for each of his prisoners. Actually, they have to share the tent. And so far, he hasn't been stopped by ACLU or anybody else. Although he has been brought before various judiciaries on his quote-unquote treatment of prisoners, nobody's taking him down. You don't, 3 squares, maybe. 3 hots, not necessarily. The cot, in his case, it really is a cot. So, anyway, go Joe. So stick around. We'll be right back after this from Temerity Magazine.
Hi, this is Chad Everson, and I'd like to welcome you to Temerity Magazine.
What is going on, everybody? Brent here, ounitproductions.com. Before we get into today's video, as always, big shout out to Rick, big shout out to the Oopa Loopa Cafe, which I have enjoyed, big shout out to my man Chad and Temerity Magazine. Today I wanted to take the opportunity to talk about something which is near and dear to my heart, and I think will help a lot of you guys who are in the buying and selling business or potentially looking in to getting into the business, and that is something known as paying yourself first. Hugely important, something you really have to follow, and the first part of it is creating and monitoring your picking fund. Now what this means is you do not want to get behind, and you do not want to start taking from your rent money and taking from your electricity bill to purchase things for the reselling business. Easier said than done. What you need to do if you're going to get into this business is you need to make sure you first off figure out your budget. Figure out how much you need to get by each and every month. What do you need to pay your bills? What do you need to eat? What do you need to pay for gas? I do this business 100% full-time, so just in turn to hopefully help you guys out who are maybe thinking of getting into the business full-time, you need to, set aside the amount of money that you're going to be able to spend on picks. And if you spend that money, if things aren't selling in eBay or whatever your outlets are, you need to make sure that you stop. I mean, it's happened to me in the past. I've spent money, I've held on to things, and you really need to make sure that you're continuously moving stuff so you're not just, becoming a hoarder. Invest in your business. For sure, you need to invest in your business, and one of the things that I actually would like to bring up is I consider my co-ops, for example, as a savings account. I have 3 separate co-op booths, and I'm continuously buying new stuff to put in, and for me, that stuff is things that I know that I can pull out to take to auction, things that I know that I can pull out to either put on eBay and Etsy, or things that I can, flip if I necessarily need to. If I get to a point where, I need to free up some money. So that's how I look at my co-ops. But I just wanted to stress the fact that it is super important to pay yourself first. Make sure that you have, a good amount of money saved up for emergencies. In this business, if you're not working a 40-hour-a-week full-time job with benefits like I do not do, once again, I'm 100% full-time, you need to continuously make sure that your finances are in check, you're not spending above your means, that you are saving enough money to pay your bills, and you need to continue to move stuff so your money grows, Simple fact, but a lot of people forget it. A lot of people forget that it's important to make sure that you survive ahead of the business. Hope it helps.
Get a little grizzly.
And thanks, Brent. I enjoy your stuff too, buddy. Anyway, later on in this particular program, we have a number of exciting things, interesting things coming up, including how do you repurpose a cigarette vending machine and make it acceptable, even kind of neat. Also, a little bit more about ancient Roman history. In this case, the Pompeians could actually go upstairs to use the bathroom, and have a photograph for that one. Also, a little bit more of open carry, just a little bit of discussion. And of course, our feature for today is actually part 2 in the conclusion of Tell City, the first 50 years, from my friend Lee Pennington and Joe Lee Productions. Now, as always, if you have suggestions, questions, comments, gripes, however you want to express yourself, feel free to do so on Facebook at the Oompa Loompa Cafe, and we will do our best to comply with that. Also, as strange as it may seem, even though I'm not in the TV studio per se, I can still do hosts. Okay, you might not be sitting right here, but you can be on the screen with me at the same time, regardless of that. So stick around for the rest of the Oompa Loompa Cafe here on the 15th already of January 2013. This is Rick Osmond. We'll be right back after these messages.